Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this Sunday night, August 16, 2015 edition of Nightcasts. We made a lot of changes in the studio with camera positions and lighting, and so we're hoping everything's going to be working fine tonight. We had some storm problems today that put us on emergency power for a little while, but friends, let's open it up. Our opening story tonight, many people have been forced to flee their homes, and one woman is believed to have died as multiple wildfires continue to burn across the United States. Laura Bicker reports.
Did they get stuff at their house?
Flames consume the parched lands of Idaho. Some manage to film the destruction as they flee, but escaping quickly also has its risks. A woman died here after hitting her head as she ran. In neighbouring Oregon, residents wake to see what is left of their homes.
By the time we got in the car, the fire was in our backyard, and we barely made it out. And I think this is the first time I've actually got to just sit and think about what happened.
In California, a driver was plucked from the wreckage of his burning car. He'd sheltered from the flames around him in a storm drain.
His guardian angel was riding with him today, so he got very lucky.
13,000 firefighters are battling 17 blazes in soaring temperatures here. Some have had to be treated for heat exhaustion. Containing these fires across the West Coast is coming at a cost. The US Forest Service is spending over $100 million every week. They've now spent their entire budget. And there are no signs this drought and the resulting fires will ease anytime soon. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Washington.
Friends, those of you who know what I mean when I talk about the blessing and cursing chapters, you know that these stories, like the one you've just been hearing about the wildfires costing the Forest Service of the United States $100 million a week, you know that we're obviously under a curse. More people are likely disobeying our Creator than are obeying Him. When you read the blessing and cursing chapters, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, I've often read those. We'll take time out to read those another time. I've got several stories tonight that I want to kind of push us through. The number of people confirmed killed in Wednesday's blast in Tianjin, China, has risen to 112. 95 people, 85 of them firefighters, are still missing, and hundreds have been hospitalized. Families of the missing firefighters have held protests saying they've not received enough information from the government. The BBC's Joe Floto says there are big questions for the authorities.
Well, the death toll has been climbing, and so has the long list of those unaccounted for. And we take a look at that list and we start to get a picture of just what a terrible price the emergency services appear to have paid in this disaster. Of the 95 unaccounted for, 85 are firefighters, and add to that the 21 firefighters who we know have already died. So the picture we're building up is that the first responders to this were caught up in the incredible cataclysm of Wednesday night and have lost their lives. So the first three squads of the fire brigade that attended the blaze on Wednesday night, barely a handful are known to have survived. There's also a police station in the port, and we don't know anything about the fate of the officers who were on duty that night. So the relatives of these emergency workers have been out on the street yesterday and again today. They're angry, they want more information, they want to know where their relatives are, but also big questions for the authorities. Firstly, was the fire brigade told about the chemicals that they were dealing with? Did they know what the fire was all about on Wednesday night. Were they properly trained for it, and did they inadvertently spray water on chemicals that then caused a chemical reaction, releasing toxic but also flammable gases into the air that set a chain reaction for those enormous explosions on Wednesday night? Big questions also about why such a high quantity of very dangerous chemicals was being stored so close to residential buildings. The distance between that warehouse and the first apartment blocks in the port of Tianjin is only 500 meters, and that goes against all the regulations. So how did that happen? And all the while, concerns about what kind of chemicals still remain at the port, what kind of risk they pose to the environment, but also to the people living nearby and in Tianjin itself.
Okay, friends, and I do know that some of you in the United States work for companies that have offices in China, and one of them in that Tianjin area. And thankfully, I was glad to read that none of your employees were injured there. I was glad to see that. Now, some of you may be watching this news program, that's news related to the Bible and prophecy, for the first time tonight. And if you are, you may be scratching your head and saying, well, what are you talking about when you refer to the... How can this be a curse on the United States to have all these wildfires? Well, it's certainly not a blessing. But you may be saying, yeah, but okay, how can you blame this on the people and their sins or lack of sins or God's involvement or not? And how can you go to the Old Testament and claim it relates to us today? Well, there are a lot of things in the Old Testament that tie us today into world news. One of them, if you go back to the book of Genesis, and toward the end of that book, in chapter 49, if you take a look there, you'll see Abraham's grandson, Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. You'll see Jacob telling his 12 sons, while he gives them a blessing for the latter days, and he tells them where their sons will be in the latter days. And, you've got to remember this. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were given a promise by God. It was handed down from Abraham to Isaac, his offspring, and Isaac's offspring, Jacob. It was handed down to Jacob's offspring, his 12 sons, that they would become as numberless as the grains of sand on the seashore and as the stars in the heavens. Abraham's offspring, Isaac, Isaac's offspring, Jacob, Jacob's offspring. The 12 sons would have sons numberless, just a huge, huge offspring. And one of Jacob's son, Joseph, the one all the other 11 brothers, were going to kill him except for Reuben, got him to be the brothers to spare him and put him in a well and then sell him off to Egyptian slavery, and then take his beautiful coat of many colors and put blood of a wild animal on it and present it to their father to let their father think Joseph had been killed after they sold him off into Egyptian slavery. And then the rest of the story, Jacob winds up saving the family during famine when they come to Egypt for food, and later on they discover with tears in their eyes that Joseph was made second in charge of Egypt. And those dreams he had that made the brothers so jealous and angry, God made that work out so that Jacob was in a great position over them, even then in the physical life. And he's going to be in a great position yet ahead. But his sons, let me get to the point. If you read Genesis chapter 49, you'll see there how Joseph was given the birthright because Reuben blew it, and Joseph stepped in the shoes of the birthright. He gets a double portion. And through Jacob, God awards to Joseph and Joseph's two sons, who took his name, the greatest. Well, let's take a look. Genesis 49. Now that I'm paused, we got a plane wreck to get to in tonight's news. But if you look toward the end of Genesis 49, go to verse 22 of Genesis 49, where God starts talking about Joseph. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him. But his bough abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, even the God of your father, who shall help you, and by the Almighty, who shall bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast and the womb and of the womb. The blessings of your father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We're able to trace those today. Now, it's more than I have time to get into on this program. On the weekend program, we play sermons by Mr. Herbert Armstrong, and sometimes I also come in and back up what Mr. Armstrong said with some details and slides and things that help. But the two sons of Joseph, Ephraim today, are the modern-day descendants in the United Kingdom, and his brother Manasseh are the modern-day descendants of the United States. And that's how it relates to us today. We are those descendants who are promised great blessings, but those blessings are conditional. And this is the point I wanted to make. If we go to the blessing and cursing chapters, I'm going to turn to one of the two. Leviticus 26 is one of the blessing and cursing chapters. It's parallel chapters, Deuteronomy 28. In verse 4 of Leviticus 26, God says, backing up in verse 3, he says, if you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, then, verse 4, I will give you rain in due season. Now, when we have the kind of forest fires and wildfires that we're having in the United States right now, we're certainly not getting that blessing promised in Leviticus 26, verse 4, where God says just before that, verse 3, if you keep my commandments, I'll give you rain in due season. Rain in due season means the right amount of rain, not so little that you have drought and you think so dry that you're going to have all kind of wildfires breaking out like we're having, and not too much rain so that we'll have flooding. That is also can be a problem. All right. I hope point made, and we're going to go on with the rest of the news for tonight. The plane wreckage I mentioned to you, the wreckage of an Indonesian plane carrying 54 people has been found in the remote western Papua region, officials say. The Trigana air flight lost contact with ground control at 14:55 local time as it flew from the capital to the town of Oksibel. Kiki Sariger has more details.
At this stage, we don't really have a lot of information of why the airplane is or was thought has been crashed, but we do know that there has been 54 people on board and that the search and rescue operation will resume tomorrow morning. The plane was en route from Sentani in Papua to Oksibel, also in Papua, and the distance is actually only 30 minutes away. But it's interesting to know that actually Papua is very hilly, so it's very mountainous, and it usually has bad weather in the area. Indonesia has seen actually a lot of airplane crashes, not only in Papua, but also in other parts of Indonesia, namely in North Sumatra and also in the Java Sea, which we all know is the AirAsia airplane crash earlier this year. So analysts have been telling me that the Indonesian government needs to do more to actually tackle this problem.
Friends, our next story relates to the second seal that you see on the chart here. That's second one over. It's red, got a red bar, a red horse at the top of it. Revelation 6 depicts the second seal as a red horse. And in plain language, Jesus Christ, quoted in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, describes this second seal, this red horse, in plain language as wars and rumors of wars and world wars. Kingdoms against kingdom, nations against nation. And in this next story, one that we're not going to play the video on until we're sure we got the licensing and get it confirmed by the BBC, but I'll just tell you, it relates to war. Syrian activists say at least 80 people have died in government airstrikes on a marketplace in the rebel-held town of Douma near Damascus. Around 200 people were reportedly injured in the attack. Now, the reporter on scene, the BBC's Issam, says that footage which has not been verified. So I'm sure we'll have more on this story tomorrow night. We'll pick up with that. Now, we're going to close tonight, friends, with... I'm keeping the program short tonight. We're going to close with a very light story about the Northern Lights with a time-lapse piece that the BBC has done here that shows the Aurora Borealis from space.
Astronauts have captured stunning and rare images of the Aurora Borealis, photographed from the International Space Station. Wow.
Scott Kelly took the footage during a sunrise on his 141st day of his year in his space mission.
It's incredible, isn't it? Pictures like these, extremely rare, and apparently last only a few milliseconds.
All right, friends, that's it for this Sunday night report on Nightcast. Thank you very much for joining us. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Monday night, with the day's current news. There are a lot of things going on, some that began today. They'll carry on tomorrow. We'll pick up with them, keep you right on top of things. Again, God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Monday night. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.